Yeah, somebody came from my office.
Kids rolling around. You just never know.
You just,
There's like a little roll up.
did somebody hit the ground?
Dr. Tony will be here in a few minutes. Okay. Don't say anything embarrassing.
Nice out. We went up to New Hampshire this weekend. Friday it was like Nashville. So Friday it was like 90 degrees. We get up there and it's 50 degrees and the wind is whipping.
One is on her way.
My cousin, there's an outdoor
One is
music event at a brewery. That sounds awesome. And I've
You're
been to
there?
this great place.
Yeah.
I don't know if she's right
I
there.
brought
Denise,
my
can you hear us?
She brought she had a pair of flip flops.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes,
I'm going to call this special meeting of the Stratford Board of Education to order. It is 6:46 on Monday, June 5th. My name is Andrea Corcoran. I'm board chair. We do have a quorum, and Ms. Cupie is joining us virtually. Say hi, Ms. Cupie, so they know you're here. Janice, say hi. There we go. All right. Perfect. And I know Dr. Sunday was stuck in a little bit of traffic, so he'll be here shortly. We'll begin this evening with the SPS AIP presentation. Ms. Borges.
Good evening, everyone. Of course, I am very happy to be up here presenting to you, as I love being able to share ideas, but I want you to know that as I go through this presentation, this was really a collaborative effort, and it was put together, and a lot of the graphs and stuff are well beyond my skills, and that came from Dr. Daniels and Matt's wonderful staff. So as we start to go through this, just know that it took a whole group of people to put this together. So I am going to I'm going to start with some ideas that have been shared from you guys, as well as the community and the principals. When we were thinking about how to repurpose this location, we really put a lot of thought and time into the subgroups and populations that we needed to put focus into, okay? So as I start to present the AIP program and I start to talk to you about the alternative instructional placement, I want you to keep in mind the target population. The target population is our secondary students who are at risk. When I use the term at risk, the underlying context is students struggling behaviorally and students struggling with chronic absenteeism. I know that we have all had many conversations, board members included, around these subgroups and how we can better service our students that are chronically absent and how we can service our students that are struggling with behavioral choices. So during this presentation, we are aiming to talk about the group we want to address. We want to give you an overview of the AIP program design. We want to talk about the goals and the outcomes for the alternative instructional placements. And we want to talk about the projected staff we would need in order to put this program in place. And we want to talk about the timeline. So those are the slides we're going to go through. keeping in mind that target population we would like to do a better job servicing. Okay, when you look at the alternative instructional placement, we're gonna focus on expulsions and students that are receiving out-of-school suspensions. We're gonna focus on the target group that Project Uplift is currently working with. We're gonna focus on homebound tutoring, and then in addition, we're gonna look at our continuing education program and providing them a more feasible area for them to give that service. The first area we're gonna look at is our expulsions and our suspensions. Take a quick second to just read through the statute. Some things will jump out at you, as they have me, okay, regarding some of those. So I'm gonna give you a second just to read through that. And if you can't see the screen, you should have a copy in front of you. We are required to provide an education to students that have been expelled. And we have to provide an education that is consistent with their educational needs when those students are students with exceptionalities. This year alone, we've had 4 students that have faced expulsion, and 3 of the 4 are students with exceptionalities. The current model we're using is not effective for those students to receive their education under homebound tutoring virtually. Okay, so this is going to be addressing that statute, the need, and to make sure we are meeting our legal requirements. Currently, now you're going to look at grade level suspensions. So we're also going to address with that population with expulsions, we're going to address students that receive out-of-school suspensions. When a student receives an out-of-school suspension, it is an absence. Okay, we're going to focus just on students that have received 10-day out-of-school suspension, not a cumulative 10 days, meaning they did an act that caused them to get a 10-day out-of-school suspension. When we look at the students that have received 10-day out-of-school suspensions, we have 60 students who have received that. That is equal to 600 absences. 600 absences works towards our district's chronic absenteeism. I did not go into details of doing the math of missed instructional time with 600 absences, but you guys are all more than capable of figuring out it's a lot of instructional time missed. That is only our secondary students, because again, remember we talked about the target group and the focus area, okay? But that is 600 absences that we could avoid by creating the alternative instructional placement and allowing students with out-of-school suspensions to go be educated by a special education teacher and a tutor, thus not receiving the absence and receiving those valuable instructional minutes that they are missing. We wanted to make sure that we're recommending the appropriate amount of staff to service this need of students. So we took the data, and thank you to these guys, we have organized it in a monthly manner. So you can see that one teacher and one tutor could service the number of students we typically expel, which is between 3 and 4, and the number of students over 10 sectional periods of time in a month that'll be out on out-of-school suspension. This breaks down on the side the number of students each month that received 10-day out-of-school suspensions. Okay, so this is feasible, this is doable. We have not gone over it. The toughest month would have been May, but we could still do it with that staff that we are recommending. Okay, so vision in your head, student gets a 10-day out-of-school suspension, principal works with the parent, we talk about them going to the alternate instructional placement instead of just sitting at home. So they're not going to get in any other trouble being at home, they're going to come, they're going to get instruction, and they're going to do their work. But there's more than just that. Okay, so after they come in and they get their instruction and they're doing their work, now we're going to look down at Project Uplift. You guys know we got Project Uplift up and moving this year. We started taking referrals at the end of February. Project Uplift to date has taken 32 referrals. We've had 2 successful completions of the program with no reoccurring event. We have 23 of the referrals coming from secondary principals, and we have 9 referrals coming from our community partners. So we have a very capable mental health professionals in Project Uplift staff that now we're going to say, we're going to shift you out of the fishbowl that you're currently working out of in Stratford High School. We're going to shift you over to AIP. You're going to continue to take these referrals, but you're also going to work with our students that are suspended and expelled. And you're going to work specifically on how to re-enter back into the community in an appropriate way. And by community, I mean your school community. We want the students, when they get suspended, to not have a reoccurring event. We don't want students repeating behaviors. We want them to work on those skills and re-enter back into their buildings with a plan. And we want someone to facilitate that so that it's smoother and it is more supportive, and we are meeting those students' needs. So Project Uplift, hopefully, in the following year, we'll get all 60 referrals that we aim for under the grant. And in addition to those 60 referrals, we'll provide service to the students that are expelled and suspended that are currently in the AIP program. Do you want to save them to the end, Mike, or you have a specific?
Can you just briefly explain again Project Uplift? What is that?
I sure can. So Project Uplift was a STOP grant. We have 3 staff members, a social worker, a psychologist, and a school counselor. And they are working with referrals from the town and referrals from our principals for students that fall into 3 buckets: chronic absenteeism, substance abuse, and violent offenses.
Thank you.
So we've talked a little bit about the number of students that are being suspended or expelled. Okay, we've talked about how we want to service them better with seat time and improve our absenteeism. We've talked about Project Uplift, adding that layer of mental health. We've talked about shifting a teacher and a tutor over to support the students in that program. So now you're talking about shifting 3 of the mental health professionals from Project Uplift to work out of that building, shifting a teacher, shifting a tutor. Now we're going to address homebound tutoring. So in addition, when the pandemic hit, tutoring went from in-person to virtual. What we have found with the virtual model is that it's just not effective for students to succeed academically, and it's far more ineffective to get students back into our buildings. Okay, so in addition to that, right now we have a lot of Project Uplift referrals coming from homebound tutoring that isn't able to get our students back into the building, when Project Uplift is reaching out to try to set up and do that. So what we want to be able to offer is homebound in-person tutoring. Right now we do have a few cases of in-person tutoring, and they happen in public areas like the library. We want to have a nice setup where we know this is safe, we have classrooms, we have tutors, we have the availability to do that. Okay, so we're looking at also impacting our homebound tutoring, which currently we have 38, which is the highest number of homebound tutoring we've ever had. We would like to see that number go down, but when you look back over a few years, they average between 25 and 30 students. We would still continue to have a very small subgroup that would need the virtual tutoring for medical reasons.
Can you provide a short description of the child who qualifies for homebound tutoring?
So you qualify for homebound tutoring for a few different ways. You can qualify for homebound tutoring under your 504, you can qualify under your IEP, and you can qualify from a medical doctor we have a homebound form that the medical doctor would fill out and say, this child will need homebound tutoring. Homebound tutoring is not meant to last for more than 90 days. Okay, so those get reviewed, and then you would need either a new doctor's note or a new referral from your IEP or a new referral from your 504 in order for you to get homebound tutoring. Homebound tutoring at the secondary level is 10 hours a week. It's 2 hours a day. That's not the instructional setup we want for our students. And we want to be able to give that to them in person and not virtually. We've gotten a lot of complaints, from people receiving homebound tutoring, and a lot of complaints from the tutors that it's just harder to get the kids to work when you're not with them. So we need to set up and provide a better environment for them to be able to receive that homebound tutoring. And then the last bucket is continuing education. I don't know how Mr. Nova managed to make it work, but this year they had 328 adults participate in continuing education in Birdseye, and they were really tight in there. Very packed in tight, very hard for him to be able to expand the program or to really meet those needs. So since we have these programs running during the school day, it seems logical to provide continuing education with some space to actually move and have enough classrooms to provide the needs there. So we added them into the bottom. When you look at it, in this building, if we repurpose the way that we're talking about, we're going to be able to service 454 people approximately. And that is a good use of a building, and we're targeting a population and an area that we in Stratford need to improve. We need to improve chronic absenteeism, and we need to do better with our students struggling with behaviors. So we're targeting 2 populations that could really use this support. Program goals. So now that we've discussed the data and the population we're going to target, I want to loop back to why and what positive outcomes may occur. Okay, so we have enhanced academic and behavioral supports for secondary students. That is what AIP is going to bring us. We have a practical response to chronic absenteeism. We have enhancements to mental health support to transition students back into the school community. Okay, and the best part, this aligns with our strategic operating plan. We are able to build opportunities for stronger relationships with families. We're able to provide strategies to assist students with resolving conflicts. And we're able to provide equitable and inclusive learning experiences for our students. Okay, so we're taking all this idea, we're hitting those goals, and we're tying it to our strategic operating plan. How are we going to know we're successful? Well, we should see a reduction in repeat serious behaviors. The layer of adding mental health support and re-entry plans for our students that have been given out-of-school suspensions and expulsions is going to help with that part of that outcome. We're going to see a reduction in chronic absenteeism. With 600 absences coming from out-of-school suspensions, it's only natural that if we can get them in front of a teacher in a building and in a program, they're not absent, and we're going to see an improvement in our chronic absenteeism. In addition to that, you're providing a better area for our Project Uplift staff who are already working with chronically absent students to give them a soft landing to get them back into a building before they re-enter into their regular buildings. Growth for students' academic performance. Well, we're providing in-person learning. And when you provide that in-person learning in that seat time, and that attention, and that adult, we're gonna have a better opportunity for these students to sit, participate, take the state assessments, and improve their academics, because they're not sitting at home waiting to possibly turn on to virtual tutoring in the afternoon. What do we need to run it? Okay, operational and staffing costs will be budget neutral. We worked really hard to see if we could shift staff in order to run this program without having to come to you guys and say, we need more money to do so, okay? We need a teacher, we're gonna shift one special education teacher. We're gonna shift one tutor. We're gonna shift a secretary so that there's somebody to buzz in and buzz out. That building already has the setup there. Project Uplift staff is already in place. We're gonna shift them over to that building in order to service there. We will have to add 2 climate specialists. Again, on the other side, this staff is gonna be servicing that population. Okay? Just so you can make that correlation. And then along with this, we have to talk about timeline. This is our timeline. We're presenting to you guys, and between June 2023 and August 2023, we have some updates to ceiling, paint, networking cable, hardware replacements and furniture. We need to notify staff of their shifts and placement. Okay, we need to make some communication to our parents to make sure they understand and know that we're approaching our out-of-school suspensions in a different way, and that we're gonna be expecting that the students show up in person for their out-of-school suspensions. Then in the fall, we wanna launch the program. We wanna reevaluate that program and come back to you with the data and impact in the spring. We wanna be able to say that we made a difference, that there were less repeat offenders, that we had more seat time, that we decreased chronic absenteeism, and that this was put together in an effective, appropriate way to move Stratford forward. That concludes my little delivery to you guys. You guys have questions?
Just a quick correction before we get into questions. Not repeat offenders, but repeat behaviors.
Sorry.
Right?
Yes, repeat behaviors.
So thank you for that, Mrs. Borges. I'm really excited about this. When I got here a couple of years ago, one of the things that, as I reviewed the organization, this academic institution, I asked a question about how do we service kids who essentially make poor enough decisions to get removed from the traditional education setting. I was not content with the way we, at that time, and all the way up till this time, provided those educational services. I felt we could do better in some spaces, working with families. We were able to make those accommodations. But we have an opportunity here with this Aspire use of that Honey Spot campus to really make a little bit more robust in ways that I think there could be an ROI to the Board of Education and district priorities. We have an opportunity here to really take advantage of this and do this in a way on a multi-programmatic campus. And that's really what it's going to be, that allows us to be distinct and adequately service all children, and also be responsive to what I call an exclusive space for some other programs such as continuing ed. So with that, I want to say thank you again to Ms. Borges and the team. Over the last couple of months, we've put a considerable amount of time into this conceptual plan to present to the board, and we will open up for questions.
So I guess my one question would be, so normally without a school suspension, right, parents don't have to worry about transportation or getting students, and now we're going to be busing them to, or sending them to Honey Spot. How are the transportation for that going to work?
That's a great question. And we have talked a little bit about it internally, and at the start of the school year, we don't see an issue because we have our drivers, okay? As our list of students that require McKinney-Vento services increases, we may need to stop and think about, do we have enough drivers to meet this need, okay? I think we'll be good to go for the first few months, but then around November and December, I may be visiting Ms. Mangini and saying, we need another driver or we need additional transportation. Hopefully we'll be able to figure that out, even if we end up using grant money for that portion to start.
So part of this is, we feel very good about this design and this presentation, but one of the objectives that we have, as we talked about this today and presented to the board, is we may have blind spots that you all may pick up on, okay? Because I think you all are very abstract thinkers, and sometimes there might be some things. And that's one of the questions, the transportation piece, knowing that, the McKinney-Vento numbers increase as the year progresses. We do have to have a response, but ultimately our families, still to the extent that they have the means, can also drop kids off at the campus.
And that's the other part of Project Uplift. So the idea is you're going to get your students there, right? We're going to work with our families to help them be held accountable to make sure their students are getting an education and not sitting at home. But you have Project Uplift too. So when they check in the morning and the teacher says, this is the list I'm supposed to have and 4 students haven't shown up, they're going to make phone calls home. They're going to go do a home visit. When they're at that home visit, they may be calling Susan Hughes and saying, we're ready now, please send transportation. We want to get the students there. And when you're looking at the small population for that monthly calendar, it's doable with 3 staff for them to work on 9 kids that are getting 10-day suspensions and 4 kids with expulsions. Once you get them in the habit, they're going to show up. So we got to work with families, and we're going to have to, put in the hard work to get them there. But it's important. 600 days of absences is not good for us as a district.
Significant. And those 600 days at approximately 6 hours and 45 minutes a day of instruction time, that's more than, you can do the math, it's more than 1,200 hours.
It's huge.
Ms. Vidal.
I have a couple of questions. Call me crazy, but Honey Spot's a little people's school. It's meant, I remember that school being very, very small. Is it equipped to hold
So it is
older students?
Currently, Honey Spot holds up through age 22.
It does.
Just so you know. Yep.
Okay.
So currently, the program houses kindergarten through 22. There are big kid tables and big kid desks.
I remember, I'm sure the furniture could be changed, but as far as the bathrooms and all of that has been updated.
They're all updated
Okay.
for larger size students. And the classrooms are good size there.
And we'll get into some of the other logistical aspects, but when we started to conceptualize this, a whole team of us did a site visit multiple times, and I know recently the team did some visits. I believe Carlos Castro was part of that team who visited the campus, and that our takeaway from that and the space and our vision for what we're trying to accomplish here made us feel like we're in a better position to absolutely get this off the ground.
Okay.
Good question.
Can I keep going?
Yeah, go for it.
An administrator at the building? Will there be an administrator or?
So although that would be ideal, right, we also need to make sure we're doing this in a fiscally responsible manner. So right now, with the teachers, the secretary, and climate staff, we can set up a protocol so that if there is need for support, they can call, and I can set up to make sure that there's support within that building. I don't think financially, for the number of students at one time that we're impacting, that we can really sustain that as a district, but as the program grows and we expand things, that's something that we should keep in mind. I think for next year, we can be okay without it. I would love it, but I was trying to be really fiscally responsible as well.
Could we house like a coordinator or something over there?
So
Is that an
here's
option? I don't know.
conceptually what would be ideal is a supervisor for this campus.
Program.
Okay, it's not just a program; it's multiple programs,
Right.
right? We do have an administrator there conceptually in Jen Nova who oversees continuing ed. There's some other things we're going to do, but right now we believe we can launch this without the fiscal burden of having an administrator on site. But eventually, as we continue to see how this meshes together, there might be a need, a distal need, but if we don't have to go to that point right now, we want to be financially responsible.
We did have a program in the past, it was much smaller than this, and there was no administrator. So there is, there are protocols and ways we can make sure the school is safe and they have ways to contact, and I do think it's something for us to keep in the back of our head, but I think for next year we can do it without it.
A few more, sorry. Custodial staff, that's all staffed at the building already,
It's
right?
already
That's
there.
already
Yes,
planned, okay.
already there, already budgeted for.
Okay. You mentioned, the goal is obviously to re-enter the students into their regular buildings. Who is going to follow from one to the other? Who is going to follow those re-entry plans and?
So the key to that is your project uplift staff.
Okay.
Your project uplift staff is gonna work with your administrators that know through the new code of conduct that we're opening up that they need to have a re-entry plan for the students that get 10-day suspensions. And that conduit, that support that's needed is gonna be those 3 mental health providers to make sure that the 2 kids that are returning on this date have a plan. They've reviewed that plan with the students. They've set it up. The students know they're gonna meet with their administrator. They know how they're gonna re-enter. And if they need that extra support, they can go with them. They can be that extra adult to help them be that support when they sit down with the administrator to talk about how to re-enter in a more appropriate and positive way. Not to mention, they've been able to check in with the students the whole time they've been there for the 10-day suspension and talk about how they're gonna make different choices, better choices. What are they gonna do? They can help some self-plans too. So your conduit's gonna be your project uplift staff, who by the way are working with a lot of the students receiving 10-day suspensions anyway because they were referred. They're going to be that conduit to get the students back in and to make sure those plans are executed. The expectation from our principals are going to be that they have those plans because that's part of our code of conduct.
There'll be that synergistic communication to the support staff on campus. Remember, this is only secondary, so we're talking about flood, booster, Stratford, So part of the staff will speak to social workers at each of those schools. They'll speak to counselors at each of those schools. And in order for a child to receive a 10-day, right, they would have to engage in a behavior that's probably chronic and high profile. So the administrators would definitely know the children. But the aim is to, Ms. Borges' point is to make sure that kids do not become recidivists in this behavior. Because if you think about it, if you have one child who receives multiple 10 days and they're not a kid with an IEP, you're talking about missing a month of school. 10 days is 2 consecutive weeks, okay? If they receive 2 10 days, you're talking about 4 weeks. Okay, so that's almost a whole month out of a 9-month academic year that a child will miss. So when we get to the spring and we start to make these evaluations, we will assess these things against a host of other internal district metrics and disaggregate that information by site.
And we're aware and prepared that while we're rolling out the code of conduct as well, we may see an influx, right? So this also, sets us up to be able to better receive that influx and make sure we're supporting the kids.
I think if you go back to, there's a slide with the table for the month. This one. So we're looking at May. Just kind of want to, that stood out to me. And if you remember, I said to the board in March, I sent a memo to our administrators. You all remember that? And April is a short month with April break. We're short about 10 days there, or 9 days. And then you see May, there's an uptick here. So it's, to your point, Ms. Bedell, and to your point, the implementation of the new code of conduct initially may see an uptick. What we're hoping to do is make sure that whatever necessitates the uptick, to the extent possible, are not behaviors or profiles that are just community-shaking behaviors by our kids. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay.
Do you have any more?
I'm good. Great.
So back when we had the other program there,
The original expulsion program?
yeah, was that, I mean, we had kids we were sending there.
It was only expulsions.
It was outsourced. So during that time frame, there were,
Oh, you're talking about
Aspire.
IPP, the old IPP?
yeah, is that it? Yeah.
That is meeting a different need. That was meeting a need for students that have autism or
That was Aspire before they got
Yes.
rebranded or
Yeah.
bought out, correct?
But we transferred into that program because we were told that Honey Spot didn't meet the current
code for a safe and secure school building. And I never did a tour of the school. I know some people did, I think, but I'm guessing there's a little more than just some touch-up paint and running a few wires that will.
I'm gonna let these guys speak to that, because yes, we've done a tour and they've looked at what needs to be done. So I don't know if Ms. Mangini or Mr. Ruggiero wanna speak to what we need to do in order to fix it and how we're fixing it.
So before they come up, just to maybe kind of, so you're absolutely right, you know, so the school in its previous state did not meet the standard for the state, right? But we were able to facilitate programs out of there, okay? And that's how Aspire is not considered a school per se, it's a program that delivers services to kids. And as I said, we've done tours of the campus and been in the space. It's gonna need a little bit of updates, certainly without a doubt that. And that's why we're very intentional about calling this a program, right? A multi-program facility. But we'll talk a little bit more, and then I'm gonna invite Ms. Mangini to talk about, it's a net zero, it's a net neutral impact on our operating budget as a board, and that's why we're so excited about this. There is no burden on the taxpayer or the operating budget.
Well, I mean, we do have to do some upgrades, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But can we, do you guys have a list of what's gonna be done, how it needs to be done?
So at this time, I'm gonna call up Mr. Ruggiero, if you can get up to the mic and just give a quick overview of some of our early thoughts for these updates. And then, Mr. Rivers, if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask you to join him up there and speak a little bit about the tech.
So we all know that the school needs some updates. Some of the updates that we want to do, one being painting, two is put a drop ceiling in, which changes all the lights. Right now it has the 12 by 12 ceiling that you staple up. Most of them all fell down trying to put them up. So we know we want to do painting, we know we want to do a drop ceiling, which will change the lighting and put in a security system, change all the lights on the outside of the building so you can actually see better. So we will add key fobs to 3 entrances to the school, all new lights on the outside, and a full security system. Matt can speak to what he's going to do for IT. But those are the things that we're looking at right now that we feel we could probably get away with those 3 on, for lighting and ceiling and painting to get us through. And I think we'll be in pretty good shape.
So some of it is exterior, some of it's interior. I know we have the entry systems that we're putting in all the schools now. Is there any thought into putting into an entry system?
So there is. I was talking with the town about redoing the doors in the front entrance. Both our side and back entrances are fine. The doors are in good shape. Don't see an issue with those. But I think we definitely want to change the front, and I've already spoken with the town regarding that. To have someone come out and give us a price.
So is that something we'd hope to do before the start of the process?
Yeah.
And so if we did, so you have a breakdown of costs, I guess.
So we're getting quotes in. I don't have everything all spelled out for you.
Okay.
Actually have a meeting with the contractor tomorrow, just to discuss a lot of different stuff, to start times and all that.
And so typically when we do a capital improvement, and we're outsourcing it to an outside contractor, we would need to send it out for an RFP or a quote
So right now we're working with a contractor that works for the town who's on state contract, and getting quotes and see where we stand.
So would that eliminate the need to go out for an RFP or?
It would, actually. And I know he does a lot of work for the town, and he's always trying to save us as much money as possible. And he does great work. He really does. And I got him through the town. So he's been pricing everything out, all the painting, all the ceiling, and all the electrical.
And I would just like to add that we've had the town's purchasing agent, Phil Ryan, involved in this process from the very beginning. We don't make any moves. We all know Phil very well, and he's incredibly helpful, but we have been working with him. And if I may just digress for a moment, I think it's important for the board to understand that the primary funding source for this project will be the ARP ESSER grant funds. As you know, we have to spend those funds by September 30th of 2024. We did reach out to the state and we asked for approval and support of utilizing funds to do this kind of just refurbishing, in the sense of making it ready for our students, cleaning it up with the ceiling tiles and the paint. And only, I have to emphasize this, only because we are adding these types of programs that they feel support a lot of the issues that they're seeing from students from COVID, with behavioral issues, social emotional learning, those types of programs. They have been supportive and they have given approval for us to move forward utilizing those funds. So that's where the primary funding source will be coming from.
So it'll be above and beyond the 200 and whatever $1,000?
Yes,
Yes.
it will probably be closer to an additional 800,000 or 900,000 over that.
So we're looking at $1 million upgrade?
Yeah.
Close to that.
Close to that. And if you think about it, since I've only been here for 3 years, but I know that's always been a concern. How is the town or the board going to find funding to make Honey Spot a little bit more habitable? And I think this is a good opportunity to do that using the ARP ESSER funds in an appropriate manner and supporting our students that at this time really need those types of supports. And it seems like a win-win.
And again, I think that an important thing to note, we do have, obviously we have commitments in the ARPESSER right now, but we do have 1 year to spend it, otherwise it goes back to the federal government. So this is an opportunity that I think satisfies a need for the Board of Education, the school system, and also supports the town from a capital standpoint, respective to Honey Spot.
So in reference to the ARP ESSER funds, and I could be wrong, but I thought I remembered at our last monthly meeting, the ARP ESSER, the totality of the ARP ESSER funds were encumbered. Did I misread that in the report?
The ESSER 2 completely encumbered and will be spent down by September 30th. I'm trying to be, I'm very visual, that's why I'm kind of looking up. I'm trying to visualize what you saw. What happens, and Kevin Clemmy and I have been working very closely over the last couple of weeks on adjusting those buckets, as we call them, because what happens is we do have our original budget, and then we have the projected expenses for the year. But just like our operating budget, we struggled filling tutor positions. We struggled with getting a lot of those after-school clubs and activities off the ground. So there's been a lot of opportunities within those budgets to save money. Coupled with that, we had a considerable amount of money set aside for capital projects. The town had encouraged us from the very beginning to set aside a percentage. So we identified a number of items, and fortunately, and I thank Rich, along with his town contacts, a lot of the work that we did with air conditioning units and some other capital items came in at less money. And we did have one item for capital that, as we go back to look at it, we never really had enough money in capital to fund it, and I will take responsibility for that. I had looked at our capital budget. It was my first year here, and I thought we had enough money to do the windows replacement at Lordship, thinking it was only $250,000, and I overlooked the fact that it was 4 years of $250,000. So unfortunately, we have to put that on hold and hope the town at some point we added it back to the capital on the other end. So there were, a bunch of adjustments that we were able to make throughout, and we continue to assess that budget. And even now with our projections, we are projecting X amount of money for summer school, and we don't really know how many students are going to end up attending. We are estimating X amount of money for after-school buses. Again, we simply don't know how many students are going to take advantage of the club. So there's all these variables that we continue to evaluate, monitor, and adjust for. That's why we have the additional funding available.
So, I mean, I think this is awesome work you guys have done. But for me, there's still a lot of questions. I don't know if this should have come through planning first. I don't know if that's the prerogative of planning to start the process and go through there. Whatever, it's here now. But it's a big financial ask, and it's a big financial shift, and this is a great overview, but myself personally, I'd like to see a little more detail on the cost and the expenses. I know we have a transfer, and we also have the financial cliff of the ESSER funds and all those things, how those are impacted, where the town comes into this. I don't know, was the school during the process when the old programs were over there, we had talked about because of the condition of the school, was the school ever decertified?
No, so it's not certified to be a school, okay, but it is certified to house a program, which is what AIP is. It's a program, a state-approved program. So it can house a program, and Aspire that's there, they did some updates while they were there. So they actually fixed some things while they have been using our building. And so the building, although it is not approved at the state to be an elementary school, it is approved for us to house programs in.
Okay. And they won't view educating our suspended students, whatever it may be, as an educational facility as opposed to a program?
It's not a
Alternate
school, it's a
instructional
program.
placement. It's a
Right.
program.
The language is important, and if you travel across the state, most communities, programs of this nature are typically housed at municipal buildings. Okay, so we have an opportunity here to take advantage of the facility, and yes, of course, it needs some level of TLC. To Mrs. Borges' point, Aspire did invest some things for some upgrades. It's definitely a functional place, and one of the things that stood out to me as we travel the campus is essentially the same way you characterize flood. Flood is ugly, but it's absolutely functional, right? And I believe that we have a similar analogy here, in that we have an opportunity to invest a little bit of funds that doesn't come at the expense to our operating budget or to the town or taxpayers. Make some upgrades and make the space functionally usable for a host of stakeholders. And we're looking at this for kids from the middle school all the way through adult ed. In the long run, in the long range, there's no doubt that this is going to be beneficial to the community and the board, but most specifically the kiddos who will access the space. Because right now, to Mrs. Borges, I can give you just a little bit of testimonial, a quick story for you. We've had a few expulsions this year, and one of the complaints that, as much as parents hurt and plead for reconsideration around certain things, one of the things when we do our check-ins, right, and I always check in with Ms. Borges every time we meet every 2 weeks, how are the kids doing, what's their progress, so on and so forth. And from time to time, we'll get an email from a parent who just speaks about the virtual capacities of things, right? And it's just not functional for their child's learning, growth, and development. We have an opportunity here. I did not see that number at the start of the year, but the 600 hours is concerning, or 600 days, right, is alarming and concerning. We have a lot of work to do from a chronic absenteeism point, and I know that's been an important topic for you, Mr. Henrik. We have some other things that we have conceptually planned as we end the year and to open up next year, but the 600 days definitely feeds into this, and that's actually a provision that I did not know that Ms. Borges brought to us, that if we're able to have our kids who are out of school suspended on our campus, then the absence does not go towards that piece. So, but we also know that when our kids are on our campus, our school grounds, they have a more tangible and robust learning experience. But doing so with skilled professionals such as social workers, project uplift staff, school counselors in that space, it actually makes us a distinctively different district than most other communities in Connecticut.
And just so you know, it needs to not be listed as a school, because we're housing our expelled students and our out-of-school suspended students in a program. They're not getting marked absent, but they also cannot be in a school building that is certified. They are expelled and suspended out of school, so they need to be in a program. That's why it's important for this to be a program and not a school building.
Well, and I mean also too, having kids that would normally be out on an out-of-school suspension roaming around is just it's gonna create more behaviors that need to be addressed, that creates the cycle. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a great concept. I think it's a great idea. Just one last question. So we've got a couple like 0 months, couple low months.
Yeah.
during those months, what will the staff be
So,
doing?
remember, you're at 0 for your suspensions. Rich, can I trade you? You're at 0 for your suspensions, but when a student's expelled,
Mhm.
they're expelled for the duration of the year. So you'll always have a small subset. Well, hopefully we don't always have a small subset, but the likelihood of us having a small subset of expelled students, we have expelled students that will be starting the year expelled. So they will always have a small subgroup, and your Project Uplift staff still has the regular referrals that they are working with on a regular basis, the 60 that we're hoping to impact for chronic absenteeism, substance abuse, and violent acts. So there'll still be kids there. Homebound tutoring never stops.
So they'll all be in a sense intermingled?
Yes, yeah, so they'll always have work to do, and there'll always be students that they're working with. I hope they have down months from out-of-school suspensions and expulsions, but we seem to be pretty consistent with the need.
But keep in mind, these are separate programs, so perhaps, our kids who receive OSS will be on one part of the campus, receiving services there. Our kids who are in expulsion will be in a different part. I mean, we'll have staff that can cross over, but keep in mind, adult ed is also there.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's an evening?
Yeah, that's an evening. Yeah.
And I know you've been good at shifting your staff around to
Yeah.
meet your needs, and
Yeah.
hopefully that'll help address some of those needs as well.
I think it's important for you to hear from Matt, too,
Yes.
just so you can hear about
Yes.
IT needs.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that's.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get
No,
sidetracked
that's
with my
fine.
original
Just
question.
really quick, yes, the school has some age, the equipment inside of the school, also has age. The cables that, run the network, we were going to, replace them before Aspire came in. This is just our opportunity to replace them now. Also, the current Wi-Fi infrastructure is non-existent, so that's what we will be added in for the students with their Chromebooks. And some more higher-end network equipment that actually runs everything that will actually be connected over to Johnson. All of the main infrastructure is there, i.e. the internet lines, the fiber cable, that's all there and functioning. We just need to get the equipment that connects to all of those things into place. I don't know if you had any specific questions or
Costs, I mean, have you started costing any?
Yes, for the wiring, we're actually using the town state contract group. And we went out to bid for our actual tangible network equipment, our switches, our routers, and our wireless access points.
I asked them, we do have some rough numbers. I asked them to hold on that today until we got a few things in, and we'll ultimately get this to the board. But we wanted to introduce this, and also we figured that in order to launch this, these exact questions will come up today. And I think one of the most important questions that we were expecting was, how is this going to get funded, right? And we wanted to share with the board and the community that because of the ESHA funding source and then perhaps some of the transfers we're going to ask the board to consider and make within the year funds to respond to some of those things. And then from a personnel standpoint, this board just gave you a good explanation of how we envision leveraging it. And then I think Ms. Goodell brings up a good piece, which is the administrative piece or supervisor piece per se, which is something that I'm not making a hard commit to right now. But I think in the long run, we may bring that conversation back to the board.
Ms. Bedell, are you finished?
Yeah.
I'm going back to the Art Besser grant for a minute here. We have quite a few positions currently in the Art Besser grant and other programming that is dependent on the Art Besser grant. Is any of that going to be sacrificed in this? Or
Those are already committed.
they are already committed?
We're
They're-
trying to get them out.
No, that's what I mean. This money that we're taking from that to primarily fund this is money that is not encumbered, has nothing to do with anybody or any program or anything right now.
That's absolutely correct. As I mentioned previously, we analyze this on a regular basis, and we had anticipated that we were going to have a little over $1 million that we needed a plan to spend down, and we've been talking about this since last fall. And when this opportunity arose, we all thought first of all, we weren't even sure this would be allowed, but we were so pleased because we thought it was the perfect solution, not only to spending down ARP ESSER, but also to meeting a really large need.
Right. When we first started, once we knew the agreement or use was going to expire with Aspire, expire with Aspire, and we started to envision how we can utilize that space to meet a district need, the natural deductive next question is how are we going to fund it? Okay, so we started to conceptualize some things. We knew we had some things we wanted to do with our trend and end of year balance, but we were not convinced it would be sufficient enough to completely make the updates that we needed to make for this program to launch in a way that could be desirable. Ms. Mangini has been excellent in working with Dr. Clemming, and they placed a call to the state. We pitched the idea to them, and they said, absolutely, you guys can go ahead and do that, because the alternative, and I know a lot of districts, massive districts like Norwalk and Bridgeport, are having a hard time spending down their federal dollars. And one of the things that the State Department of Education has backed school districts with is, we don't want you to send the money back to the feds. Okay, so how can we support you? What plans can you put into place to make sure you spend the money that you may have? So this is an excellent opportunity for us.
Ms. Cupie, I can't see you, so I'm going to ask you if you have any questions.
Sure, I just want to make a comment. I want to commend the team on just how you've been, strategic in creating sort of these targeted solutions, for the challenges that we face in the district and within some of our schools. I appreciate the level of thought and analysis that is put into, these types of decisions. And for this particular program, I like that it is creating opportunities for our students in spite of their poor decision making that caused them to, end up in suspension or expulsion. I also like that we're maximizing the use of our spaces and alleviating some of the pressures that are, within some of our buildings. I did have a thought, or rather, sort of a question, but it's likely not an issue because, just the fact that being suspended and, being marked as absent is supposed to be somewhat of a deterrent, right? Like a consequence of their behavior. Now that they're not going to be marked absent, which is good for our district data, and it's good that they're going to have a place to go where they can continue their learning. I was just wondering, do you foresee the fact that they no longer have the consequence of an absence a rise in behavior that leads to suspension? Because, hey, I'm not going to suffer, being marked absent. I'm just curious if you've thought about that.
I feel that the
Or
ultimate
see
deterrent would
anything.
be having the suspension on your record, probably more than the absence. I don't know. I know in my house that would definitely be what they would be in trouble for, and not the absence. So hopefully.
Yeah, I was just curious if the team, as they were going through and doing the analysis and looking ahead, if that was part of any of the discussion that came up. I was just curious where their minds were. But overall, I appreciate all that you're doing here. Thank you very much.
No, that's a very good question, and I hate to give you a politically correct response by saying it depends on the child, but I think it does depend on the child. I think kids, certainly high school kids, are savvy enough to know the impacts of absences on the loss of credit and progress towards graduation, okay? So in some ways, it may, but when you study kids who get in trouble, okay, on a regular basis, oftentimes the priority is not a function of, is this going to impact my credit per se? Oftentimes the biggest deterrent is a cut of access to their peers, so to speak, right? But if you remember what Ms. Borges, how she framed it, part of this work is to make sure that we reduce any kind of recidivism, right? So when we look at this program, if you go to that last slide, that timeline that Ms. Borges brought up, is we want to see, come spring and April, we will track numbers and trends, which Ms. Cupia, I believe, 2 years ago when I first got here, one of the things you and I discussed was this notion of, ROI. How do we know it's actually working? How do we know about program effectiveness? Now, decrease in suspensions are not the only metric that we will track over time, but with things that become recidivist and they spread, almost like a contagion, it can help shape culture around poor decision making and bad behavior, so to speak. So I think the asset there in this design is that, to Mr. Henry's point, rather than the kids sitting on the couch and playing video games, or maybe potentially making a choice to log on to a virtual connection, or to just maybe perhaps move around town during the school day, now they have a committed adult who is actually on site, either supporting from a tutoring standpoint or helping around some of the social and emotional pieces. So in many ways, we're providing the resources and expertise or skill set of the adults to help with character development and positive decision making. But I just gave you a long-winded response, but hopefully, it supplements my politically correct response that it depends on the child.
Thank you.
No.
Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you to all involved in this presentation this evening.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes, sir. I'm
Could-
sorry.
And I don't know if it's possible at this point, but planning does have a meeting on Thursday, and I think part of our purview is, what happens to new buildings, new programs. Is there any way we can get a presentation there for the members, just so they're apprised?
Sure.
And I don't know, I know it's short notice, but.
Of course, I don't think that's an issue. We wanted to bring this, we're looking at this as an academic program function more than it is a facility function, okay? We do have the opportunity to make sure the facility is in as quality condition. So it's not necessarily being channeled through plans and planning. That's why we brought it directly to the full board. But I think you bring up some good points. I think we can certainly either revisit this presentation or truncate. I think what would be helpful is, I know we're waiting on a few estimates. I'm sure that's going to be part of the conversation at planning. I think I'll see if Mr. Ruggiero and Mr. Rivers can nudge, the contractors on the list to get some of those numbers in, and then we can certainly make that presentation to planning.
And even as far as the numbers, if we can even just get an initial cost estimate and somewhat of a detailed breakdown as to what your thoughts are, what's our responsibility, what's the town, if the town's gonna chip in, or, what the process will be, but just like you're doing a job.
Yeah, so it's, I'll probably answer most of those questions right now, but nonetheless, we'll get that itemized breakdown. There is absolutely no responsibility from the town, okay? And there's actually no responsibility from the Board of Education via its operating budget, next year's budget. We're gonna ask the board to take a look at some of the year-end balance. We're gonna have some things coming in right now. Thank you all for being so gracious for that. But we'll have some opportunities here with our year-end balance this year to maybe do a few things. The rest of it is completely coming out of the federal funds that we discussed. So no burden either way, and that's why we're excited about launching this opportunity.
Great. Thank you. We'll move on to item B, the budget transfer itself. Ms. Mangini, would you mind giving us a few details?
Happy to. As we were trying to estimate some of the costs, as Mr. Henry pointed out, and as I confirmed, we were nearing $1 million. So there were a couple of items we felt might be worth considering utilizing fiscal year 23 year-end dollars. And the items that we chose were those that were safety and IT related, because we would really, if it is approved, we'd like to get going on those as quickly as possible. So before you this evening is a transfer request in the amount of $228,452, and it is for camera servers, smart boards, computer screens, and security cameras and within the building. Are those outside or inside, Matt?
The cameras?
Yeah, both, okay. I wasn't sure what this dollar amount was covering, so it is both. And that is our recommendation. Again, we are offering to utilize balances in the salary accounts because that's primarily where our year-end balance is at the moment.
Great. Thank you. So I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed transfer to cover various technology and safety upgrades to Honey Spot House. We'll be using available balances in object 111 and 112 due to vacancies to offset this balance in object 600 and 700. Total budget transfer amount is $228,000. $228,452. So moved by Mrs. Wiltie. Second by Ms. Carol Fabian. Any discussion?
I do have, so, I know this is part of a bigger project. There's some more funding to go with it. Is this, you might have said it, but is this a time-sensitive transfer? Is it something that we could get a little more information on and wait till our June meeting, or?
This aspect of it is time sensitive. I'm gonna defer to you, Ms. Mangini.
I believe it's time sensitive in the sense of trying to get the cameras in, and Matt can correct me if I'm wrong. Smart boards, obviously, there is some type of delay in getting that type of equipment, so we were kind of anxious to move on them. Again, those were why we chose these items to bring to you this evening, but.
And do you have any type of a surplus in your current IT budget that might?
Currently?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So you couldn't pull any funds without a transfer to start the process?
Unfortunately.
Okay. And then just one last question, I guess we do have a surplus. We're pushing towards a surplus. We transferred some funds last month. We're transferring some this month. What is the date that what is our last date to expend any surplus funds before we have to turn those numbers over to the town?
End of the fiscal year.
What day is that? June 30th?
June 30.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Any other discussion? Super. Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Henrik?
Yes.
Ms. Bedell?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. Carol Fabian?
Yes.
Mrs. Wiltie?
Yes.
Ms. Cupie?
Yes.
And chair votes yes, motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much, everybody, and seeing no further business on,
Just say,
yes.
just a quick statement. I just wanted to express, it's been a long year, but I think, I was excited when we launched our SOP last year, and I know that the conversations we've had behind this DS has been really centered on meeting the mission and the vision of the district. So I know we've had some complex conversations, but on behalf of the district and our families and our students, I appreciate the conversation here and the support from this Board of Education. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much. Seeing no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr.
Second.
Henrik, second by Ms. Bedell, all in favor? Meeting adjourned at 7:46. Thank you all.
When's the next